Good morning. Welcome to y'all. My title this morning is What the Redeemed Wear, and my text that I want to really get the meat from is Colossians chapter 3, verse 12. I got to thank Janelle for reading this passage this past weekend so that it just stuck with me ever since then. So I'm talking about clothes this morning, and all of you, as near as I can tell, yes, all of you went to your closets like I did this morning and looked in there and decided on some clothes that you thought you wanted to wear for church this morning. And maybe you're like me, I had a couple shirts to pick from, and I decided I wanted to wear black pants today, and so I found my black pants. And what goes with my black pants? I have several options for shirts. I chose this shirt and made sure I got a t-shirt with it. And my wife says, "You forgot your belt." Got my belt. We go through this process, and we wear clothes. And it's very important to so many people, to all of us here, and everyone around us. As I thought about clothing, I thought about what is clothing for? What would you say clothing is for? I don't know. Anybody want to venture a guess? It's not hard. I'm sorry? To cover, right? Yeah. Modesty. We need that. Any other ideas? What would you say clothing is for? Loyal? Keeps you warm? Yes. The first thing I had down is modesty. You don't need to turn to Genesis 3:7. Everybody knows that passage. Adam and Eve sinned against God, and they realized that they were naked, and so they pulled some fig leaves around. And the fig leaves to try to cover themselves up. And there's a lot of things that I wish I understood about that process, but I don't, so I'm not going to go down that bunny trail. God came along and said, fig leaves ain't going to work. We're going to do suits of animal skins to cover the man and his wife. Modesty is important. It's not where I want to spend most of my time, but what I think is interesting about people's need to cover their bodies, it's so mysterious to me. But this is how people are. They take off like 99% of their clothing. And they have these little bitty strips of cloth. Then they have a wardrobe malfunction and expose an extra 2 square inches of skin, and then they're horribly embarrassed about it. I'm like, I don't get it, okay? But this is how people are. This is how people function. People have an innate sense that your body, or at least certain parts of your body, should be covered. And there's shame involved if they're not covered. I want to read Nahum 3, verse 5. Strange passage in a prophet talking about Nineveh as a symbolism. Uses this concept of modesty and the shame associated whenever you lose it to help the city of Nineveh understand what it's going to be like whenever their city is destroyed. I am against you, declares the Lord Almighty. I will lift your skirts over your face. I will show the nations your nakedness and the kingdoms your shame. We wear clothes to kind of keep our shame and our nakedness hidden, out of public view. That's very important. Not going to say more about that. That's why, at a very basic reason, that's why you put clothes on this morning. But Loyal's also right. You put some clothes on for weather protection. And you choose appropriate clothing based on the weather. Now, down here in the South, we don't have near as much of a problem as other places where I've been, other places where Loyal has lived, where you wear clothes so that you can stay warm. I saw a sign in a ski shop in Colorado one time that said, "There is no such thing as bad weather. There is only the wrong clothes for the weather." And I'm like, maybe that's right. Maybe that's right. Because, to me, if it's cold, that's bad weather, right? But no, you just wear your down jackets and you put your leggings on and you bundle up and you're comfortable. It's fine. It's great. You're warm. You get to enjoy the crisp, cold snow, and it's great. So that's the other thing clothes are for. Weather protection, a hat to keep the sun off of you, sleeves to keep the sun off of you. Those are some things that we have to worry about here. But by far, the biggest reason you choose the clothes that you are wearing today is related to self-expression. You want to convey a message, understood or not understood, to the people around you, and so you chose those clothes. Frances Corner has this quote. He or she wrote a book about fashion. "Faster than anything else, what we wear tells the story of who we are or who we want to be. Fashion is the most immediate and intimate form of self-expression." It's very important to us here sitting in this building, and us being Americans and us being humans, it's very important for us to communicate through our clothing. It matters so much. And I'm telling you, it matters just as much to conservative Christians, the message they give through their clothes, as it does to maybe, say, a transgender activist who wants to also send a message through their clothes. And the messages people give, and it's not just the writing on the t-shirt, although it's that, right? It's like one time I was ministering down in Austin. I was in 6th Street. And there was a man who was running for city councilman. And those of us who have been to Austin or been to Texas, live in Texas, know that they're trying to keep Austin weird. And his way of keeping Austin weird was to wear pink tights, so that everybody understands that, he's weird, just like all the rest of Austin, and this is why you should vote for me. And I don't know if he won the election or not, but it was just gross. But hey, self-expression, that's what he was trying to convey. Other people, all of us have, we picked clothes that were specifically not, say, pink tights, for example, because we don't want to be associated with the depravity of that lifestyle, perhaps. I used to think that fashion was meaningless and stupid. It's just annoying. Just put your clothes on, right? That's all that matters. But really, fashion matters. It matters so much. It's one of the top industries in the world. I didn't write down all my little statistics I read, but somewhere, if you look at the amount of money and investment and industry associated with manufacturing clothing, it's more than the whole economy of Russia tied up in clothing. It matters so much. There's this term, fast fashion, referring to the fact that clothing and fashion changes so quickly, so rapidly. You wear clothes and they're immediately out of style. 400% more clothing are produced now than just 20 years ago when I was a teenager. 4 times more clothing being produced, sold, donated to Goodwill, and put in the trash. And on average, a garment is only worn 7 times before it's gotten rid of. That's average, right? Okay? Because there's people that wear them one time, and then there's people that wear them, Maybe like some of us, maybe like some of you, where you wear it 50 or 100 times before you're like, wait a minute, this is so threadbare, it's tore a hole in it, I can't wear this anymore, it doesn't fit anymore, something like that. But the average is only 7 wearings. There's no wonder they don't make clothing as durable as they used to, because you're going to throw it away before it's even, most clothes will last 10, 20 washings. If your average is 7, that's double. It's plenty, right? Why is fashion so important? Why are these clothing that we select so important? It has so much to do with first impressions. First impressions are huge. I was reading, podcaster telling a story about a bank robber who robbed millions of rubles from this Russian bank. He was a Russian Bolshevik revolutionary back before the Bolsheviks were really a thing. And this fellow was involved in the bank robbery. They carried off their bank robbery, set off a bunch of bombs in the square, grabbed the cash from the stagecoach, put it in their own wagon, dashed off down the road. In the explosion, they knocked out or killed all of the surrounding police officers, so there was nobody pursuing them. They're traveling down the road, and the person who's driving the coach is dressed as an Army cavalry officer. And he's approached, coming the other way, there's 2 or 3 policemen who heard about the explosion and the robbery in the square and are coming to safeguard the cash. They meet the stagecoach that's currently carrying millions of rubles, the whole bank heist, and this robber, who's dressed as an Army cavalry captain, sticks his head out and said, "The money is safe, hurry, go back there." And they took one look at him. He had the bearing, the actions, the clothes, everything of an Army officer. And they believed him and went on. And it wasn't until weeks later that they realized that that was the stagecoach where all the money was. Based only off of his clothing, the hat, but also the bearing as well. And we do this all the time. We look at somebody, we see somebody. You're there looking for something in Lowe's or Home Depot. You see somebody over there. You think, is he going to be able to help me? Does he know where those screws are? You see, how many times have you? I know I have several times. I'm shopping in Staples or something, and people come up to me and ask me where to find. Why do they come and ask me? I'm just another customer. They think, based on the clothing that I'm wearing, that I work there. We make all of these snap decisions about interactions with each other based strictly on the clothing that we wear. And it's not bad, it's just the way we are, it's the way we're wired, it's our social interactions. So that's why it's important to make sure you wear the right clothes, right? Because the clothing makes the man. Have you heard that quote? And it's true both ways, right? The clothing that you wear affects how you act, and the clothing and the way that you act affects what clothing you want to wear. People, if you want that, you've heard the term dress for success. It's a thing. The way you wear the clothes makes so much difference. So many of our interactions on each other are based. Do I trust you? Do I think you're the kind of person I want to do business with? Do I want you to be my banker now that you're wearing flip-flops? Or type of thing, that type of, these kind of interactions. Now, how do we respond to this? What is a Christian's response? Jesus says in Matthew chapter 6, maybe you already know this passage. Matthew chapter 6. I'm going to start reading at verse 25. You'll excuse me, I'm reading from the NIV. Therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more important than food, and the body more important than clothes? Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they? Who of you, by worrying, can add a single hour to his life? And why do you worry about clothes? See how the lilies of the field grow? They do not labor or spin. Yet I tell you that not even Solomon in all his splendor was dressed like one of these. If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, will he not much more clothe you, O ye of little faith? So do not worry, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For the pagans run after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Therefore do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. I think what Jesus is saying here, besides saying don't get all caught up in the ins and the outs of fashion, and don't get all obsessed about what you're going, whether you look just so, because he says God is able to affect your presentation, how you appear, so much better than you can. God can handle that part so much better than keeping up with making sure we have the right fashion. I'm going to flip over to 1 Peter 3, verse 5. I'm sorry, I promise I'm going to get to Colossians here after a bit. Lord willing. So this is talking about wives and their proper demeanor and what they should do and wear and this kind of things. Verse 5 says, I'm going to go back to verse 4. Instead, it should be that of your inner self, the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is of great worth in God's sight. For this is the way the holy women of the past, who put their hope in God, used to make themselves beautiful. They were submissive to their own husbands, like Sarah, who obeyed Abraham in calling him master. Ye are her daughters if you do what is right and do not give way to fear. This passage as well is talking about a way to present in our social interactions that doesn't have to do with cloth and fabric and sequins. It has to do with a demeanor, a spirit, a submissiveness, honoring God. It's talking about another way to be beautiful. Now let's go to our Colossians passage. Colossians 3, verse 12. Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly beloved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with each other and forgive whatever grievances you may have against one another. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. And over all these virtues, put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity. Now, when you got up this morning and you went to your closet to pick out the clothes that you wanted to wear to church, did you remember to grab your gentleness? Did you put on kindness when you put on your belt? I'm sorry, maybe half of you don't put on belts. Did you remember the patience? This was great. After we talked about this on our trip, we went to go visit the Alamo. And, you know, with a group of 8 people and a lot of us being adventuresome type people, it was a little tough to stay together all in one group. And it was a great reminder that day. We'd been together for 3 or 4 days, and you kind of start figuring out your social interactions, and some people are just kind of going to go off do their own thing, and other times we think we should wait on each other. And that day I really was glad that I put on my patience that morning, because I needed it. I needed it a lot. And others also needed their patience put on that day, and gentleness and humility and kindness. And I tell you, if that is what we put on in the morning, it makes such a difference in those interactions. I wish we could get to the place, and I believe as Christians we need to get to the place where the first impressions is not based off of fabrics and clothes and styles, but on these kind of clothing. People should say, yeah, I remember meeting that lady. I don't really remember what she was wearing. I don't know what color it was. I don't know. I just remember she was so kind. Is that the impression that people get as a first impression from their interactions with you? That's what we're looking for. Let's look at these clothing again. Compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. And then it talks about forgiveness. It's almost like forgiveness is like this personal grooming when you go to the mirror, and shave maybe, or comb your hair and brush your teeth, and, go through and your personal hygiene routine of forgiveness. And then when you're all done, put your suit coat on, right? I got my suit coat this morning. I was going to bring it. It says, over all these virtues, put on love, which binds everything together. Make sure that your love, and I'm telling you, when you put your love on, that looks good. And that is powerful. And that draws people to the kingdom of God. When their first impression in their interaction with you is that guy is wearing love today. This same passage points out what the world clothes themselves with. Back up in verse 5. And think about, or maybe don't think about, fashions of the world as we read this list of what the world puts on for their clothing. Put to death, therefore, whatever belongs to your earthly nature: sexual immorality, impurity, lust, evil desires, and greed, which is idolatry. And if you'll just think about fashions of the world, and that's pretty much what they're about. They're about greed, lust, evil desires, sexual immorality. We live in Texas, and people take off too many clothes in the summertime, and as men we have to be careful about that. But it's no wonder, right? That's the kind of clothing that the worldly people, that the unregenerate heart wants to put on. That's what's there. But as believers, let's put on the other kind of clothing: humility, gentleness. Verse 9 says, you've taken off your old self with its practices. We took off these clothes. We don't do things that way anymore. While I'm here in Colossians, look up at chapter 2, verse 20. Religion uses another way to deal with lust and evil desires, greed, sexual immorality, etc. Colossians 2:20, since you died with Christ to the basic principles of this world, why, as though you still belong to it, do you submit to its rules? Do not handle, do not taste, do not touch. These are all destined to perish with use because they're based on human commands and teachings. Such regulations indeed have an appearance of wisdom with their self-imposed worship, their false humility, and their harsh treatment of the body. But they lack any value in restraining sensual indulgence. We need a better way to deal with the old nature. We need to put on, take off the old clothes, allow Christ to cleanse us from these things, and put on the new clothes. Don't try to tidy up the filthy rags. Just change the clothes.